Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the People and Dancefloors podcast. I think we're on episode 15, which is crazy. And I am so pleased that today Harold Heath is with us. Hiya, Harold.
Hello, how are you doing? Nice to be here.
Yeah, lovely to have you. So Harold is a DJ, and his career kind of spans the kind of full history of electronic dance music. And more recently, Harold has published a book called Long Relationships, which is how I came across him on Twitter. And there was a lot of hype around the book, and so I had to go and see it for myself. And I have to say that I was totally blown away by how by the way that Harold has kind of intertwined his experiences with a lot of like poignant reflections about his life and career and different worlds that he has encountered through DJing. So basically I just invited him, and I'm so glad you could join us. Welcome. So as I said, the book is called Long Relationships: My Incredible Journey from Unknown DJ to Small-Time DJ. And my first question, or my first reflection, really is about the title of the book, Long Relationships. I know that Long Relationships is one of your big releases, so maybe the title came from there. But I also was struck by it because it makes me think about my own relationships with different parts of the culture, I guess you could call it the culture. So music, friends, and other connections that you make along the way. Drugs, both maybe internally produced by the hype of being there and externally consumed, as well as the music industry, I guess, for you in particular as well. So tell me a bit more about how this Long Relationships framing or idea came to you.
Well, I couldn't think of a name for the book. The book was halfway finished, maybe three-quarters finished, and I couldn't think of a name for it. I've got a little note on my computer of all the awful titles that I'd rejected. Terrible things like DJing for life and, life DJ and all this kind of thing. And I didn't even have a working title for it, really. I didn't really know what to call it. And then just as I was writing about that release I had, Long Relationships, I thought, you know what, that's it. That sums it up. That's what it's been. And it's just a bit of serendipity, it's just a lucky thing, really, that song title. It was a song I released. It did very well for me. And it just ties in perfectly with what the book's about, really. It's just very, very lucky. Because obviously, having been into dance music since the early 80s, I have had, a long relationship with dance music and dance music culture. So it's just a lucky thing, really.
Yeah.
A sign that it was the right thing to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was thinking about how I think for me, like, I never thought about framing it as a relationship, but when I read your book, then all of a sudden it made so much sense to me. And then also, I think, maybe like, I don't know, maybe subconsciously when you were naming your song or your EP, Long Relationships, maybe that's what, subconsciously maybe what you were thinking about was coming out of you.
I certainly feel differently about all those years spent clubbing and DJing. I think I say it in the book, and it's one of the main points of the book is at the time we really just thought we were having fun, but we weren't. There was something else going on as well. And we were sort of in a relationship with this culture because, we went there and we were hedonists and we had fun, but also it gave us so much as well. In a small way, it was kind of the making of us, I think. It taught us a lot about, about meeting new people, about the power of the group. And, we live in a society that's defined by individualism, and you're very much valued as to how much you can earn in the marketplace, right? But you step into DJ culture and it's all about community. It's about the group. It's a total alternative to that kind of, the 9 to 5 slog kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I forgot what the question was. I talked so long on that one.
Well, I guess we're sort of like cycling in from Long Relationships to thinking about, what's in it for people, right, in this relationship, and what was in it for you, and what's in it for people. And you're talking about, what you learned from being involved with music and the scene.
I learned about community. I learned little things. Like I learned a lot about Black history and gay history, and I learned about the struggles of people who live far away, because you know, it's all about black music, and you know, house music culture came from gay, black and Latino culture. So it taught me history. It taught me that people are still living through those struggles. It gave us a lot, you know. It gave us, I think, yeah, there's something about community, something about groups, something about the power of a group. I think it gave me that. I think it taught us that we didn't have to have our culture spoon-fed to us, that we could be active participants and make something good. You know, a party was good because of all the people there, not because of that one person that we went to be entertained by, right? So I think it taught us the value of being active and of making something brilliant. And like I said, at the time, we just thought we were having fun. But back on all those years now, I really can see that in some ways it was the making of us. You know?
Yeah, I think thinking back, you know, you can sort of make sense of these experiences in a different way. And what you said about community really resonates with me, and it resonates with all the people that I've spoken to in the context of the People and Dancefloors project. But I think the added bonus about thinking about history, thinking about group struggles, thinking about how we are actually deprived of community and group belonging in a lot of ways, in the way that our lives are structured, and the systems, maybe systems of power, want us to kind of leave our lives, and so I think people have this craving to belong and to join something, and I think that the dance floor does that for people, even if it is in a temporary kind of zone or in a temporary way. The dance floor gives that kind of sense of belonging to people.
It's temporary, and in many ways it's really shallow and it's hedonistic, but it also is something else as well. It can be two things at once. In many ways it's really silly. It's like we're like kids at a disco, right? Do you know what I mean? But also I think it can be those two things at once. One of the most wonderful things about this culture is that it's silly, it's frivolous, it's hedonistic. It's also life-changing, life-affirming, and really important to countless people across the world, included.
Yeah, I agree totally. So the other thing I was going to ask you about is just because I really love your descriptions about dance floor in the book, and obviously you've got this kind of vantage point where you're observing the dance floor as a DJ over many years, and so you're basically kind of capturing this concoction, the power of the concoction between the music, the DJ, the crowds, the setting, the drugs, and so on. And I was thinking about what you said before about how it's not just about the DJ, because I've been to places, and I'm sure other people have too, where the DJ can do wonderful things, but the crowd is not there, and so the vibe is not there. And then I've been to places where you might not have very high expectations about, and then it becomes like there is this magic, that happens in a moment, and there is a kind of unison, and everything sort of moves together, and it feels like a force. So it's just, I don't know, I just think that it's interesting in terms of, I guess, hierarchies of, what we might think of as like a good night versus a bad night. And then usually that sort of maybe gets turned on its head a little bit. I don't really know where I'm going with this.
Well, I agree with what you just said. Yeah, I mean, the DJ is, again, it's kind of a two-sided thing. The DJ is quite important, but they're not that important. You know what I mean? A good DJ is a great thing, but the best parties we know are the ones where everyone is kind of joined together and something is generated on the dance floor. I don't want to sound like a hippie, because I'm not a hippie, but there is like almost a spiritual connection, some kind of mass consciousness. I'm embarrassed to say those kind of things a little bit, because it sounds like I'm a hippie.
Well,
something magical happens, man. We've been there, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe in to some extent, hippies are right in terms of like
that's not
how to access spirituality in a kind of consumeristic world, or in a consumeristic environment, is to you kind of bypass the individual experience and the kind of finite experience that is your body and the individual, to be able to, and you bypass it. Usually, drugs help the kind of bypassing. You get like lose inhibitions, you kind of let yourself go, and then you become part of the whole, which is
exactly that. And doing that, it's quite a brave thing, I think, as well. And I think it does make you grow a little bit. You know what I mean? Usually 99% of the time, I think it's a good thing to lose yourself a little bit, to kind of let go of your ego and let that group kind of take over. Because then you realise the power of the group, do you know what I mean? It kind of restores your faith in humanity a little bit. Because you're no longer just a lost soul in the ocean. Surrounded by humans who are exactly like you, you know. And yeah,
and I think that, you know, humans are like you, but also like you can connect with strangers, and normally you're taught that, you know, you should only rely on your like in-group and your tribe and your friends and so on, which is true, you know, for the majority of people in terms of like day to day, you know, they can't rely on strangers to, you know, to support them. But when you're in a club environment or in a rave environment, a festival, you do feel like anybody, you know, anybody could be supportive, or everybody else is kind of like you, like everybody's in it in the same way. So it's quite beautiful that.
We're all there for the same thing, aren't we? We're all there for the same thing, and we're all the same thing. And yeah, it's certainly a chance to meet people that perhaps you wouldn't hang out with otherwise as well, isn't it?
I think especially in COVID, I found that I really missed the interaction with strangers that I might get going out. Yeah.
We're all longing for that, I think, aren't we?
So the next question is really about people who don't go out dancing and are not into electronic dance music, and therefore don't have the lived experience-based understanding of maybe what we're talking about, and they might think it's all a lot of nonsense, and you know, we're all crazy and we're just on drugs and whatever. And so it feels like there isn't much cultural sympathy for this compared to, say, for example, the opera, or you know, something that is considered to be high culture and therefore well respected, and kind of, I don't know, I guess maybe in the West, maybe universally understood as good culture. So I was thinking, what are your thoughts about kind of activities that are like ours, that are relegated to the realm of bad culture, or indeed youth culture, which has also got kind of stigmatized connotations, because like you can do it when you're young, but then you need to grow out.
We have a habit in dance music over the last few years of quoting figures from the Nighttime Alliance, saying the nighttime culture generates this much money, employs this many people. And that's true. And we have to use that defence against the things that might threaten our culture, because that's the only language that the government understand. But to purely evaluate this thing in terms of its value to the economy is to vastly undervalue what it is, right? Because as we've said, it enriches the lives of people, countless people, so much. And also, you know, we're talking about dance music culture in the UK has been the site of creation of so many genres that have been so influential. You know, you take a pick from UK funky, dubstep, UK garage, rave, hardcore, all these things. We created that in the dance. Do you know what I mean? The promoters, the producers, the DJs, the dancers, all everyone involved in that. So yeah, this thing we do generates lots of money for the economy, and that's great, but it also has been a great, amazing site of cultural creation and has enriched countless lives hugely. Do you know what I mean? So it has more value than that, just the monetary value. But you're right, it doesn't get the same, it's not treated the same at all as opera or ballet, but nothing against opera or ballet, I'm sure they're brilliant. But yeah, it's not treated the same. It is, I think it's probably the drugs has a large part of it. You know, it does tend to sully people's idea of it. I think also lots of clubs are in really prime spots in town centres that would be really tasty for a developer, right? And, you know, again, that's that larger kind of, that part of society that doesn't care about much except money will only see that as a bit of land that they can make money out of, right? So why do they care about us inventing grime or something? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of getting to an age, I'm like 34 now, and I can see how in amongst my kind of peer group, there's a lot of people who kind of used to go out and now are getting to the point where they're having families and therefore they don't go out anymore. And I think because there is the cultural expectation that you grow out of drug taking and dancing and going out and so on, and then the people that continue to do it in their adulthood or in their sort of, you know, when they get older, are maybe looked down upon. And I also think that some of the same people that used to go out like in their like 20s or early 30s maybe, or younger, then move into like desirable areas, and then they don't want the noisy clubs on their, you know, and so obviously there is developers and there is gentrification and but there's also NIMBYism, and some of that NIMBYism is that, you know, not in my backyard, by the same people that used to be, you know, maybe going out 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier, or whatever. Yeah. So I guess my question to you is like, how did you deal with like getting older but still being committed to the culture, to DJing, to electronic dance music? Like, how did you deal with it, in your life? And maybe you can reflect on some of your friends or connections.
It is, you can't go out as much when you're my age. I couldn't go out every weekend because I would need every week to recover. Whereas when I was young, I mean, you can stay up all weekend and then bounce back Tuesday morning, come up smiling, do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So inevitably, the amount that I can go clubbing has reduced substantially. And I tend to go clubbing mostly special occasions, really. And, for music industry events, there will usually be club events as well. So it's kind of punctuated by a few occasions throughout the year. And there's a little bit of ageism, I think, sometimes. Sometimes people think an older person maybe shouldn't be in a club, maybe it's a young person's environment. And sometimes I kind of think that's true as well. Not that older people shouldn't be in the club, but it is a young person's environment, man. It's, it's extraordinarily loud and disorientating. It's full pelt. You really do have to immerse yourself in it. And someone of my age can't do that very much. Do you know what I mean? So I guess you get older, you temper it a little bit. You have to dial things down a little bit. But the passion for the music never goes. Do you know what I mean? And the passion to listen and enjoy the music, but also to share it and DJ, that never changes. That's irrelevant. My body might give up, but there'll still be something inside that will still love that, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that there's also kind of maybe a reframing that needs to happen around this idea that, maybe clubs are environments that are primarily there for young people, but they shouldn't necessarily exclude older people, or indeed that older people shouldn't be judged for still wanting to go out, even if it is, a much rarer occasion, or, more infrequent, and so on. Sorry, go ahead.
Because of kind of the house scene in Britain was always about egalitarianism, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? I think it became, certainly I remember when I first started going to parties, although it was mostly young people, if there were older people there, it didn't raise an eyebrow. It was kind of more, it's more accepting, right? And I think that thread of acceptance, it has carried on through dance music. It's, just not everywhere. But certainly in some little pockets, there's still that, the places I would go to party, if I go to somewhere like the Faith Party in London, there'll be lots of old people there, but they'll still be having it. And same with Wiggle as well. If I go to the Tech House Wiggle party, there'll be lots of old people there, but there'll be lots of young people there too. So the good parties don't care about age, I think.
Yeah, it's true. And I actually, it was interesting. I went to a party during COVID where, you were supposedly needing to sit down, but it was a Jane Fitz party, and there was a lot of older ravers there, and it was amazing to see that actually in that context where people could sit down and chill, as well as like maybe have a little dance. There was more older ravers than I'd ever seen in a club environment in London before. And I don't know, I just felt really comfortable with that. And I don't like it when, I guess it's because I'm starting to get old myself. I don't like it when I'm just surrounded by 18-year-olds.
Those kind of gigs are perfect for people my age, you know what I mean? They get to sit down quite a lot,
Yeah, it's good. And what about sort of raving and being in the culture and having kids? Have you got any thoughts on that? Because I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think in the first few years of having kids, inevitably it's going to affect your ability to rave and so on. But then, they grow up and then you can carry on again. Do you know what I mean? I think lots of people have that little renaissance once their kids get to a certain age. But yeah, certainly for the first, when they're a toddler and they're a baby and that, if you're doing a decent job as a parent, you're probably knackered. Do you know what I mean? Parenting will make you tired. And yeah, I think it does, for a lot of people, it does finish their clubbing career. But many people come back again. I was a bit like that. I certainly didn't do. Well, that's not true, actually. I still kept. Yeah, because I was still DJing when my son was born. He's 14 now. I think people come back, don't they? They have a renaissance. You see it again and again.
And how do you think, obviously, because you said your son is 14, I'm just curious about whether you think you obviously your son knows you, knows what you're about, but how do you think you're gonna react when he is introduced to raving and and all that?
It's into it. I'd be very pleased if he did. I don't think he's going to. He doesn't strike me as that type of a boy. He's quite a geek, really. I mean, I think kids react against their parents, don't
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
And so defining himself as not like me. So he's not, he's not really into clothes like I am. He's not into music the same way I am. He's very much into his own little thing. He started reading my book, actually. So I think we are probably at some point going to have conversations about drugs quite soon. Yeah, I was quite frank about that in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, the next question actually was going to be about drugs. And I'm really interested in, I think part of the point of the project was to kind of facilitate conversations, for example, between different generations of people, maybe the generation of people who, only tried a spliff at a party, and then the generation of people who took quite a lot of ecstasy and maybe other stimulants going out, and maybe psychedelics as well, and how those two generations could have conversations about drugs with each other that were more open. So I guess leading into that, I mean, you do touch upon your relationship with drugs in the book, and you talk about sort of how moderate consumption can be, can agree with DJing, but obviously too much is not a good idea in any kind of event. So maybe tell me a little bit more about your observations in terms of the role of drugs in the scene and your relationship, or indeed what you observed, drugs and clubs, drugs and dances.
Well, they do kind of go together. I mean, I know a few people who've never touched them and who just love the dance and love the atmosphere, and they still get the same thing that we all got from it. They still get that sense of community. But they are also in the minority of clubbers, really, in my opinion. I don't know if that's true now. I think there is a difference generationally. I think another thing about my son reading the book and about him reading about the drug side of it, it does, for people of my generation, you're right, we did take a wide variety of drugs and experimented quite substantially over quite a long period of time. And I don't think that's the case maybe for the current generation, because, Acid House was quite a new, exciting cultural thing, right? And we all kind of swept along in this thing. And I don't think that's happening anymore. I don't think we're getting that kind of big nationwide tribal thing of everyone belonging to one thing. So I think necessarily the drug experience is quite different now. Having said that, I think also the drug experience in clubs remains the same, really, for a lot of people, because the two things go together so well, don't they? The dark, the lights, the loud music, whatever substance, it's still it's still a good thing. That's my observation on it. It's still a good thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, for example, you were talking about how it struck you that maybe some clubs were potentially endangered or ruined by their relationship with sort of the underground kind of criminal networks that were running the drugs at different points in time. So I was wondering whether whether you had any thoughts on whether ultimately in that sense the drugs were maybe necessary, but also detrimental to some of the clubs in the scene.
Yeah, I mean there are many detrimental effects of taking drugs. We could sing their praises for ages, but also there are lots of downsides to taking drugs personally, and look at problems Tabak has had. You know what I mean? Once a local authority gets a whiff of some kind of drug action at the club, that club's in trouble, man. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's always a terribly double-edged sword, maybe a triple-edged sword. There's many edges to taking drugs, and I wouldn't wholeheartedly just say to kids, "Hey, take drugs." Do you know what I mean? But equally, it's a complex thing, drug taking, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Equally, I wouldn't say don't take drugs either.
Yeah, I think it's I guess there is a difference between to say to people, this is what drugs do. These are some of the effects that you might experience. These are some of the benefits that may incur from the experience, and these are some of the downsides or risks or adverse effects that you could possibly experience. And then to also say that, I think, I guess even though a lot of people have done it and continue to do it, taking drugs every weekend is not really sustainable. So obviously, and indeed, a lot of the harm reduction advise that that is given to people now is to say, take drugs very moderately and once in a blue moon, and you'll probably be fine and you will not experience much of the negative effects. And indeed, a lot of some of the most negative substances like alcohol, like tobacco, like maybe cocaine are probably the most harmful really in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. No, but it's also difficult to I guess if you're a polysubstance user, it's also difficult to say, I'll take this one and a little bit, but I won't take that and that and that, like I won't drink and I won't smoke, but I'll take a little bit of ecstasy, but I won't take, cocaine if I'm offered. It's it becomes a really difficult thing to navigate, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can be flippant about it, but you're right, it can be very difficult to navigate. Lots of people get in trouble. There are lots of other elements, your own personality, your own upbringing, those kind of things, and they can contribute to all sorts of terrible problems that we've seen. I don't mean to make light of it at all. Me and lots of people I knew were quite lucky in that we dipped in, had lots of fun, and came out relatively unscathed. But, I guess that isn't everyone's experience. And you're right, the whole criminality element of it as well does cast quite a shadow across clubland. Definitely.
Yeah, because I mean, some of the individuals you described in the book seem like sort of some bright characters and a bit scary.
Yeah. It does seem to, the club environment does seem to attract quite a lot of criminality, in my experience.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, if you reading the kind of the research around kind of clubs and leisure studies that covered the whole period or the spectrum of that period, there was a lot of discussion about how, particularly in the 90s, there was a real strong connection between sort of the criminal underground and clubs. Yes. Something that later on became more diluted as a result of that kind of business model essentially not being successful. But a lot of the clubs had their own kind of in-house dealers, and there was a sort of that kind of arrangement. Yeah, definitely. Well, that was my experience of it. Definitely. I wonder, as clubbing has become more corporate, if it has become less criminally infested. Maybe. Maybe. I mean, I think it's there's certainly I haven't seen an in-house dealer for a long time, that's for sure. But maybe I'm not looking properly. But I think that the connection is not as straightforward maybe as it once was, or as direct as it once was. Right. The next question I've got is about this phrase that I loved that you have in the book, where you talk about, where you said that the dance music scene is both progressive and conservative. So I just would like to hear your more about what you mean by that.
We think of ourselves as progressive. Certainly, I think of myself as part of a culture that goes back to, like I said before, the gay and lesbian and Black and Latino communities of urban America. Right, that's where I get that. That's where I think I'm sitting, and that's a really egalitarian, really progressive culture, right? And we're really welcoming and tolerant and all those things. And then there's this other side to dance music. For example, when people introduced CDJs and digital DJ, you suddenly see there's this incredible conservatism to dance music, to any kind of new idea or any kind of new technology. You're destroying DJ. Do you know what I mean? There's that. There's a whole ready-made discourse that comes as soon as anything new happens. So we are quite a strange mixture of the progressive and the conservative, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, I was thinking about, it's interesting about the resistance to adopting new technology, and now there's still a lot of vinyl purists out there who are just that.
Yeah, I mean, I say in the book, I love vinyl, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that other things are bad, right? Other things are good too. And just because someone's a digital DJ, it doesn't mean they're not a proper DJ. You know what I mean? Mm. I always say a good DJ will do a good job on whatever you give them. Do you know what I mean? It's about their skill and their selection and so on. It's not about the equipment, really.
Yeah.
And people who say that, the crackles on vinyl make the music sound better, they're wrong. It doesn't. You know what I mean? That's just incorrect. You don't need crackles to make an Aretha Franklin record sound authentic, right?
No, not at all. I think it's just people associate that sound with the crackles because that's maybe the first time or the very early times they heard it. It was on vinyl, and therefore, or because it's an old piece of music. I don't know. There's weird mental associations that people might make with the sound of crackling vinyl. But I don't know. I agree with you that to me it's just about selection really, and like the right selection for the right moment. So
yeah, always that's what it's about. Anything else, anything else is ancillary. It might be important, it might not, but it's all about just that getting that tune right at that time.
Yeah. I was also thinking about, some like I was thinking about the dance floor as like, essentially that you do kind of when you enter the dance floor and the club, like it is a filter, and so you don't necessarily get everything that happens outside, you don't get inside. So, obviously people behave differently. Maybe they're more open, maybe they're more interactive with one another. They're not as like scared of each other's bodies and stuff like that. So that things are different, but also some of the things, they do filter in from outside. So you do get some of the same behaviors. You do get like harassment, and you get like, people being dicks to each other, sometimes fights and stuff. So in that sense, I was thinking about, progressive and conservative in relation to kind of the dance floor behavior and how people interact on the dance floor. Yeah. Anyway, the last question I've got for you is about utopias. I always ask this question to everyone because I like thinking about utopias more than dystopias, which I feel like I'm forced to think about dystopias every day. So what is your kind of utopia for dance music culture in the future? What sort of things would you like to see change, if at all, and in what direction?
I think what I want to happen and what is going to happen might be quite different. I think we're going to see lots more technology being applied to dance music and DJing culture. I think eventually you'll be able to buy an AI that sounds like Nina Kravitz or Carl Cox. Do you know what I mean? Why that's possible. They all DJ on digital equipment, right? So you could record every single tweak they do over a set. You could record 100 sets of theirs throughout the year. And then you have their DJ style in algorithm form. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be that kind of thing. I think there'll be more AI-related music stuff and more personal stuff. So DJs will be able to get a new song, but it's got Nina Simone singing a Kylie Minogue record or something. I think AIs will become clever enough to do all that kind of thing. In some ways, all that stuff sounds quite exciting and quite utopian. I can kind of maybe get on board with that. But personally, I mean, a dance music utopia for me, it's not exactly retro, but, we had a dance music utopia, and I've seen it many times over the last 30 years, and it's a really simple combination, and it's quite easy for us to get it back. You just get some of your mates and some of their mates, and you get in a basement, and you put the strobe on. I don't feel a need to develop the culture in new and exciting ways, because I think it functions really brilliantly at its most raw, pure form. With your mates, play that music, stay together in that room for 18 hours and see how you feel when the sun comes up.
Do you think there's something about numbers? Like, do you think that it's more that people are more facilitated to have a bonding experience if they are in like a smaller, more intimate like venue with like a smaller number of people, or like does it not matter? They can still have that sort of bonding experience even if it's like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people on a festival ground.
I think there might be something in that. I think the optimum number might be around 200 or 300 experience. Thinking of the very best events I've been to. I mean, even some bigger raves back in the day, maybe up to 1,000, I don't know. But yeah, I think there is something about a little group of people. You eat the same faces throughout the night as you travel around the rave, right? I think there's something about that, and I think there's something about with a small group of people, you can take them all in, right? You can conceptualize the amount of people who are there. If it gets too big, it's too much. It's too much of a big thing. And maybe it's difficult to, for you all to be experiencing the same thing. Little small group, it's more kind of purified, almost distilled. It's like a distilled experience, maybe. So yeah, personally, I prefer a little small party, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I'm like definitely feel the sense of belonging is increased when I'm able to like spot the same faces, over the course of one night, and just be yeah, and feel like the whole room is with me. And I think that's really hard to do when there's, really large numbers or really like extensive kind of environments, I guess.
Yeah, I want to be able to catch eyes with someone throughout the night, not just once and never see them again, right?
That's right, yeah. And I've got one final point about utopia, which is, I guess, about the role of drugs in all this. So what do you think, do you have any thoughts about what would be the best kind of solution to the drug issue in the context of dance music culture? Like, what do you envision to be, like, do you have any thoughts about what might work best, in long term or in the medium term?
People are going to take drugs, right? Drugs are really illegal at the moment. People are still taking them. So for me, harm reduction seems to be the best approach. I know governments struggle with that because it means that you're kind of encouraging people to break the law. I'm interested in the idea of decriminalisation. I think for most drugs, I think that seems to make a lot of sense. Some drugs I find it more difficult. I don't think you can treat all the drugs the same. I don't think they're all the same. I think if I could go to the shop and buy cocaine, that might be problematic. Do you know? I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I don't think the answer is criminalising everything. I think lots of the drugs are different, but I definitely think I think having them illegal isn't working, right? The war against drugs isn't working. So my thoughts on that would be decriminalisation, and then let's look at them individually. Because heroin, cocaine, and ecstasy and cannabis are very different things. So is LSD, is that, and to treat them all as one thing seems slightly odd. But criminalise them all isn't working.
Yeah. I think there's a bit, the result of the kind of legislation that we have now is that all these different substances that have very different characters and effects get lumped together, and then we lose the nuanced distinctions between them in terms of how we treat them, I guess, and then and then that's obviously produces problems more than it solves.
Is it Portugal? Portugal have done quite a good job of decriminalising drugs, haven't they? They haven't seen a huge rise in drug addicts.
No.
The model does. There's some. The model works, right?
Yeah, I mean they have quite interesting initiatives, including quite extensive drug testing they offer at most big festivals, for example. And also, I think that they haven't seen increases in use particularly, and they've also seen a reduction in drug-related deaths, which is what we have seen an increase of in the UK. So yeah.
Ultimately, that to me, that's I hate to use the phrase, it's stupid. It's a no-brainer, right? If we're seeing a reduction in deaths because of policy, let's instigate that policy, right?
Yeah, and I think ultimately for me in the UK in particular, that is the ultimate issue. Like drug-related deaths is the ultimate thing that we want to be tackling, right? That's like we want to save we want to save people, and so that's what policies should be doing. Yeah, cool. But anyway, that's it. I've got no other questions. I'm so pleased that you could join us today.
I'm very pleased to be here. I hope it was okay. I've done a lot of these interviews, and sometimes I find myself in the middle of talking, thinking, have I talked too long about this? Am I just rambling? Are they just being polite? So I hope it was okay. It
was wonderful, and I think I'm the chief rambler anyway. So I normally
ramble. It gives me a chance to think about what I'm going to say. You know what I mean?
It's perfect. You need that. You need a good back and forth and some breaks. But thank you so much. And obviously I'll put a link to your book as well when I write the blog about the interview. And and thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, thanks very much.